Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Lent from New Visions for Public Schools. Would somebody please type into the chat, the group chat, to let me know if you can hear me? Awesome. That's great. Thank you, everybody. So my name is Timothy Lent. I work for New Visions for Public Schools, and I work on the Global History Project and a little bit on the U.S. History Project. Uh, Usually I'm joined by my colleague Camila Rashid, but she cannot join us tonight. She is preparing for a real life PD, and I will be doing the virtual one. So today's PD is on assessments in the global history curriculum, but we are going to talk a little bit about US history curriculum assessments as well. So let's get to know our Zoom environment a little bit. At the bottom of your screen, and sometimes it sneaks its way up to the top, there is a little button that says chat. This is how we're going to be communicating throughout. I've muted all of you so there's not too much commotion. And if you wouldn't mind, please type in your name and your school district or school or organization into that chat. That's how I'm going to take attendance for today. So go ahead and type it in. Oh, nice. Got some people from Western New York. That's where I am. Long Island, Hudson Valley, Mid Lakes. I used to play them in soccer. Brooklyn, I used to live there. Super cool. Welcome, everybody. All right, other things that you'll see in the presentation. On the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the tiny URL link for the presentation. So if you'd like to follow along on your computer, there will be some things you can click on, some things that are going to take us off the presentation that might be helpful. And that will be there the whole time. So let's talk about what we're going to do. First, some housekeeping things on the agenda. First, we had another webinar. Our very first webinar was last month. That was an introduction to the curriculum. If you missed it and you want to check it out, there are links in the presentation to the presentation for that webinar and also to the recording of that webinar. We've got some upcoming webinars. We're doing them every third Tuesday of the month for the next 4 months. So if you're interested in any of those topics, you can click on them and sign up. Also, for New York State teachers, you can get CTLE credits for this 1-hour webinar. All you have to do is make sure that you've registered, which you must have if you got this link, and you've written your name and school in the chat so I can take attendance. In about a week, you'll get a message from New Vision saying that your CTLE credit certificate is ready, and then you're just going to go to our workshops.newvisions.org website and log in, and there's a way to download your certificate from there. It's articulated in this image here, but you can also click on these FAQs that are listed on this slide to get the directions and any more information you need. Hey, everybody that just came in, welcome. If you just entered the webinar, just type your name and the school where you teach in the chat so I can take attendance. Thanks. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to do a brief introduction to the New Vision Social Studies curriculum, like super brief, for anyone who's brand new to it. We're going to talk about the New Vision's Global History Assessment Philosophy and the security that we have on our assessments. We're going to look at the resources and types of assessments that are available to you as a user of the curriculum. We're going to just do a brief case study on how you might modify these resources. And then we're going to go to the website and I'm going to show you where everything is in case you don't know where to find it. Cool. Hey, Chris Hitchcock is here. If you don't already check out the SS chat, hashtag SS chat on Twitter, you should get on that. She hosts it and it's awesome. So a quick thing about New Visions for Public Schools. New Visions for Public Schools is a nonprofit organization in New York City. And we support schools throughout the city with all sorts of things, from HR support, data analysis, professional development, and thanks, Chris. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we started writing curriculum. So for anyone in New York State, New Visions is kind of analogous to a BOCES in that with BOCES, you have constituent districts that pay in money to get services from that BOCES. It's kind of the same thing for New Visions, but New Visions works with New York City schools. And some schools outside of New York City who ask politely. The Global History curriculum is a comprehensive curriculum for 9th and 10th grade set to the New York State social studies framework. And our main goal is to help out New York State teachers, but as you can tell from some of the places that are mentioned in the chat, there are people all over the country and world that use the curriculum, and we're happy to have everybody. Just a few reasons why we created this in the first place. For our schools that we work with, we had very low pass rates on the Global Regents exam. That's an exam that prevents students from graduating most often. When we started the curriculum, the New York State Social Studies Framework had just come out. There were rumors that the Regents was going to change, which it is doing right now. And so we wanted to have a support for people that are dealing with those changes. We had high teacher turnover rate. We think that teachers were spending too much time looking for curriculum materials online, and there was infrequent school collaboration. So what often happened in the schools that we work with is that a new teacher came in, they didn't have any curriculum when they started. Maybe somebody pointed to a filing cabinet at the corner of their room that was all rusted out and they could hardly even open. So they spent the next 2 or 3 years cobbling together some kind of curriculum, and then they'd get burnt out from staying up till 2 a.m. every single night, and then maybe leave the school or leave the profession and take that curriculum with them to be replaced by another teacher. And the cycle continued. So we wanted to create something that would work as a foundation for all teachers teaching global history. Our big goal is to create the most useful resource for global history teachers in New York State that we possibly can. And so we do that by creating resources aligned to the New York State framework. We put it into a cohesive curriculum. We build it up on common student assessments in collaboration with teachers through cycles of feedback. And in the long run, we think this will lead to a more adaptive, comprehensive, and effective curriculum than any one teacher can design independently. Kind of with all our powers combined, we are great curriculum, we hope. So to achieve that goal, we have a theory of change, and I only bring it up because I want to highlight and pivot to what we're here to talk about today. Here's our theory of change for the curriculum work, which is that if teachers use a common scope and sequence, they're teaching the same concepts at roughly the same time using high quality materials. If they use formative assessment strategies that are regularly embedded in instruction and use that student work to inform subsequent instructional moves. If teachers actively participate in communities of practice, maybe in their school or maybe in webinars or maybe in workshops. And if teachers use technology effectively, then teacher practice will improve and hopefully student achievement will increase as well. So today we're going to be talking about this second bullet, formative assessment strategies and assessments in general, and how to use them to get some information about your students that can really help you as a teacher and hopefully help you help students. Let me stop for a minute. If there's any questions just about the curriculum in general, put them into the chat and I will answer them. I know how much wait time you're supposed to give in a classroom, but a webinar feels a little different. So I'm going to move on. Let's talk about our big picture assessment philosophy. We believe that all assessments should be used formatively. Yes, we have end of unit assessments that could be viewed as summative assessments. The Regents exam, of course, at the end of the year is a summative assessment. But we think that when possible, all assessments should be used formatively. And by that, I mean they should be used to guide a teacher's instructional decisions with the purpose of moving their students closer to their learning objectives. So the assessment is an opportunity to see how well your students are doing with the content and skills that you'd like them to achieve. And then it's an opportunity for you to shift your instruction to meet those needs. And there's just an example here on this slide. We think anything that you use in class could be used formatively. Could be just a worksheet that you use in class, and if you spend the time to look at it carefully to assess student skill and knowledge, that's a formative assessment. At the same time, if you give a big, huge unit exam, but you never give it back to students and you don't give any useful feedback, you're not using it formatively. Here's a big point. All of our assessments are locked down. So we try to prevent students from getting access to our assessments, mostly because when we put the website up for the first time, it took about 3 weeks for students to find the assessments and then start selling them to their colleagues, their classmates for money. So we want to prevent that. We want to make sure that your assessments are secure. So to do it, we have a process where you fill out a form. And let me see if I can click on that form and you'll be able to see it. Can you all see the form that I'm projecting? Great, I just wanted to make sure. All right, so you fill out this form and just write in your name and your school district and your school email address, followed by some kind of Google email. Maybe your school uses Google. That's great, you can use that email account. Maybe your school doesn't use Google and so you use a personal account. That's totally be fine. What I'm really checking out when I look over these form submissions is that you've got some school email address that looks like an official school email address. It's usually got a district name in it. It doesn't have the word student anywhere in it. It doesn't have a graduation date in it, you know, like 22. That's a dead giveaway that it's a student. So if any of those things are true, or if it's a personal email, I'll send an email back asking for an official school email address. Students will not respond and teachers usually will. So if you haven't already, click on that link, ask for access to the assessments, and then right when this webinar is done, if you haven't gotten access yet, I will make sure that you get access. I'll fill it out. I will take those form assessments, those form submissions, and act on them right away. Thanks, Aruna and Danny, for getting that question about CTLE. If you look at the maybe second or third slide, there's an explanation on how to get them also. All right, let's talk about some of the resources we have for you related to assessments. I'm first going to highlight some of them in the presentation, and then I'm going to take you to the website to show you where you can find them in case you don't have this presentation to click off of. The first resource is our assessment bank. This is where we put all of the assessment items that we create or assessment items that we take from previous Regents exams, and we put them into categories for Global 1, 2, and US history. This assessment bank has items that are aligned to the new Regents exams. So these are stimulus-based multiple choice questions. These are constructed response questions for Part 2 Global. They're short essay questions for US history. And for the essays, they're enduring issues essays and civic literacy essays. So let's give that a click. I want to show you a little bit about this exam bank. And actually, here you go. I'm just going to link it right into the chat for anyone who's not following along on the on the presentation, so you can give that a click. You need access to that as well, so if you can't access it yet, you will be able to after the webinar when I get through those form submissions. Actually, let me put the assessment form access link in the chat as well. Look at us, we're learning how to do webinars. All right, so here's the exam question bank. The first page is the landing page where you can then go to whatever you're interested in finding. So for example, if I am looking for stimulus-based multiple choice questions for global history, I would click here. And the way we have global listed is that you can scroll down to the topic that you're looking for, give that a click, let's say French Revolution causes. Webinar might be slowing me down a little bit. So I'm just gonna scroll down so you can take a look. And you can see these are the teacher materials, teacher-facing information. It's got the stimulus, it's got the questions, and then it's got a bunch of characteristics of the stimuli and the questions. So if you're doing some kind of data analysis, you can use that. The same thing is true for US history. You can just click off of here to get US history. We've got items written for all of the units for multiple choice, all of the units for part 2, and most of the units for civic literacy essay. Just a quick note, anyone in New York State already knows this, especially if you're a US history teacher and you're giving the exam this year. Information about this new US history exam has come out, but it hasn't come out, as soon as we all would like it. So we are working on creating as many assessment items as we can aligned to this new exam. And when we finally get the first Regents exam for US history, we're gonna have to probably go back and revise them all based on what we see to make sure that it's more realistic to what the state's expecting. So we're trying our best for US history, and we will get better as we go. So I'm not going to click on any of these things because it will slow down, but please explore this. We've got tons of enduring issues essays. If you're looking for them, there's like 2 for every single unit. One that we use in our enduring issues check-ins, one that we use for our essays, a whole bunch of constructed response items. And just one thing to note is that most of these items are used in our end of unit assessments. So if you are planning to use one of these for instruction in your unit, just check the end of unit assessment to see if it's also used there. If it is, maybe take it out of the assessment or find something else to use in your instruction. All right, so that's the assessment bank. Anyone who just joined, welcome. Please type your name and your school, your district, or your organization into the chat. That's how we're taking attendance. You can follow along on the presentation if you'd like using the URL that's at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Here are some other resources we have. These are annual assessments. We've got pre-assessment / post-assessment for global history. We also have that for US history. It's just not on this presentation. And the global history pre-assessment takes students through some prompts that will give teachers some information about how good of writers they are, really. They are some free response questions and some that mimic the Regents exam. So we can kind of figure out what the skills are of the students at the very beginning of the year. In addition, something you might want to use now is the practice exam for global history. This is just something you can use as a mock Regents exam early in the spring. and then get the analysis from it and figure out where your kids are between now and the end. It's a little easier now that we have some Regents exams that are already been put out. Those are just as good for a practice exam. So for annual assessments, pre-assessment, post-assessment, we use the same assessment for both. So you can compare how much students have progressed. And the practice exam, which you can use as something at the end of 10th grade before the Regents exam. Then there's a set of recurring assessments. You'll see these all over the place in the global curriculum. The first are end of unit assessments, which are cumulative, meaning that there are questions from previous units on every single end of unit assessment. Some people don't love that, but we think it's important to communicate to students that remembering the content from previous units is an important skill in history classes in general, but especially if you're a New York State teacher and you have that end of year Regents exam. You've got to be studying the previous material, and it helps if it's assessed on each of the exams. So if I were to click on this example of an end of unit assessment, I'm going to click off that assessment, and we're going to find another one later to show you, because that is out of date. That's all good though. We've got end of unit assessments for every single unit in global history and US history. The other recurring type of assessment that you'll see are formative assessments. That's what this FA means at the end of all of our revised materials in global. Bit of a mystery for some people. Formative assessment. And this is a way to evaluate if students met the objective for each of the resources. Here's an example of a formative assessment that comes at the end of one of our recently revised Cold War units, or Cold War lessons. In this one, students are asked to explain the historical circumstances that led to the development depicted in this Time magazine cover. So we're expecting, and you can see this content and vocabulary checklist above, we're expecting students to use these terms in their response. Arms race, nuclear, mutually assured destruction, and Cold War. It's a way to communicate to students what you'd like them to use, forces them to use that vocabulary, and then it also provides a useful checklist for grading. So take a look out for those formative assessments at the end of each supporting question. I mentioned quite a bit of this already, but we've got the same kind of things for US history right now. You've got the items in the assessment bank and then end of unit assessments at the end of each unit. Those new assessments are also cumulative. And there's just a note here that we're going to be revising the items and assessments for after the new administration of the new US exam. For anyone who is a nervous US history teacher, we do not have an inside track on what the exam is going to be like. We don't get to see inside the room where the state develops those exams. So we are just basing all of our materials on what is publicly available. Any questions about the assessment materials that we have, the resources that are available to you? Put it in the chat box. And another reminder, if you are just joining us, make sure you put in your name and your school or district in the chat function. That is how I'm taking attendance today. What a great segue question. Are there modified materials available for differentiation? There are not, we don't have modified materials, like we don't have like levels of readings or different options for you, because it's very difficult for us to know what kind of modifications need to be made because we don't know your students. But we do have a bunch of suggestions for how you can modify these materials, which happens to be the next topic of this webinar. And we've got some examples that might help. So let's get to that. Modifying the assessments. Let me take a break just to step back a little bit and say, these rules for modifying the assessments are the same for anything in the curriculum. We do not recommend that any teacher goes to the New Visions website, prints out exactly what is there, and then hands it to their students. You could do that. We think the materials are high quality enough, but you're liable to make big mistakes. So please read through the materials, make modifications for your students. Don't just use them as is. So here are some suggestions for modifying the assessments. First, modify the resources to meet the needs of your students and base the needs of your students on data. Here, I'm really talking about skills. So if your students, let's say it's the beginning of 9th grade, they took the pre-assessment and they tried an enduring issues essay and they really had no idea what they were doing. It was obvious that they didn't do anything with enduring issues in middle school. And so you're kind of starting from scratch. That first assessment at the end of the first unit in the second unit in 9th grade has a full enduring issues essay on it. So maybe you want to change that assessment to just something where you're asking the kids to come up with the enduring issue. Maybe they're just identifying the enduring issue. That would be a big change to make. It wouldn't make any sense in that case to give students a full enduring issues essay if you know that they're going to fall flat on their faces. So modify the resources based on students' skills and their needs. Second, complete the activities yourself before assigning them to students. I feel like I should say that even closer to the camera. Complete the assignments before you give them to students. Not only is it a good way for you to think about your instruction by experiencing what students are going to experience, but you may also find some typos. We're not perfect over here. Third, beware of your pacing. Choose carefully what content and tasks to emphasize and de-emphasize. Our exams are created based on a pacing calendar that you might not be following exactly to. So make sure you look through the materials that are there and pull out anything that you didn't cover, anything you don't intend to cover, and add in anything that you intend to cover. Fourth, you cannot give in-depth feedback on every assessment, so choose wisely which and what to comment on. You can't do a full writing analysis on every single essay that you give students. So pick and choose which assessments you're going to give feedback on. Pick and choose which ones you're going to look at very carefully and closely, which ones you're looking just to check off for completion, and which ones you're really trying to see like how students' writing has improved. So to kind of illustrate these points, I've got a little case study. It's a bit of a story. It's a short one. And it's about a fictional school that's based on a very real school that I worked with in the South Bronx. This is the High School for Teaching and Learning. Some demographics about the High School for Teaching and Learning here in the South Bronx. The student demographic is 65% Hispanic, 20% African American, 10% white, 4% Asian. But I think even more important, 15% of the students are students with disabilities and 5% are English language learners. As far as the Regents exam, 65% of their students passed last year and 15% of those received a score over 85. These are scores that are common amongst the schools I often work with. And that's the situation we're looking at for this school, Teaching and Learning. So let's take a look at what the teachers and the department have done there. This is kind of a way of illustrating like how you could maybe use all the assessment structures in New Visions to use student work to kind of make your instructional decisions. And if you're interested in the whole story, you can click on that link at the top of the presentation. It's quite lengthy, but it's also fun to read. So when they started out the year, the high school for teaching and learning social studies department decided they were going to use pre-assessments. So the 10th grade class, led by Ms. Hall, administered this Global 2 pre-assessment. And they used a skills-based rubric and this analysis sheet that comes with that pre-assessment to figure out how their students are doing with writing. The results of that analysis look a little like this screenshot here of a table. These are actual student results, but not actual student names, obviously. And so the teachers identified this column here under category B. Are there complex sentences that use conjunctions such as but, because, and so as a place where they might want to intervene? They noticed that the students are writing in short, simple, choppy sentences and didn't really use language to make the connections between them. And as we know, those connections are really important for the elusive analysis on the Regents exam, making connections between cause and effect, comparison, and evaluation. You need these conjunctions to do it. And so Ms. Hall looks ahead in her units. She identifies a few lessons in the first and second unit where she thinks she can reinforce the use of conjunctions. So maybe that looks like her doing a do now, where students are choosing which conjunction they want to use, or maybe they're completing sentences that use conjunction. Maybe she's got these conjunctions posted on the wall behind her, and she points to them whenever a student gives an incomplete response and she wants them to finish it. The one cause of the French Revolution was inequality. She slaps the because and says, keep going, give me more. So after she's figured out where she's going to put this into her instruction, she wants to modify one of her assessments. So she looks ahead at this assessment, this formative assessment that's on the left here that says original task. This is for a causes of the French Revolution lesson, which is linked here if you'd like to check it out. It's a contextualization lesson where we're expecting students to write maybe a combined contextualization paragraph. They're going to explain everything that led to the French Revolution. But this teacher has identified one very specific skill that she'd like to assess and give feedback on. So she's going to modify this task to what you see on the right-hand side, where she's asking students to use these conjunctions they've been working on to see if they know how to use them in a sentence. Something that's cool about using but, because, and so, which happens to be one of my favorite formative assessment strategies, is that it not only reinforces the use of these conjunctions, which are super important for good writing, but it also is a great test to see if students know the content. If you're going to finish this sentence, the First and Second Estates had a lot of power in France in the mid-1700s because you're going to have to show that you know the content as well as how to use the conjunction. So that was a really short story. But you can see how you might want to use student data to then look ahead in the curriculum, modify those formative assessments, and then get more information to see how students are progressing. Got just a couple more suggestions for how you might modify some of these resources. The first, and this might help out with differentiation, at least for the writing part, consider using scaffolded formative assessment templates, like these ones for contextualization. These things are pretty cool, I think. You can't find them on the website right now, only available through webinar, just because we haven't put it up yet. I'm going to try clicking on it. All right, so this document has got a whole bunch of different formative assessment ideas. They're not all about scaffolding, but it might be something to think about. For those who use standards-based grading or like to focus on objectives, you may be familiar with I can statements. These are some I can statements that you might use for the skill of contextualization. These would be things you want to make clear to students that these are your goals. As I scroll down, I'm going to scroll past this writing toolbox that's got some ideas for writing, and then just show you some of the options for scaffolding. So this would be the highest level for students to choose. And in the most ideal world, you give students the prompt, and then they would have to choose which scaffolding level they want to use, hopefully with your encouragement to challenge them. The students that are challenging themselves the most would use this one, where it's just the prompt, explain the historical and geographic circumstances that led to the French Revolution. Great question. Here is a link for the scaffolded contextualization templates. I'm going to just put it in the chat for anyone who's not following along in the presentation. There you go. Maybe students need a little more help. Maybe they're not sure what talking about historical circumstances entails. So then maybe you would provide them with these question words. Okay, well, who was involved? When did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it occur? And why? And maybe they write down some notes about those answers, and then they put it all together in a combined paragraph. Oh yeah, you can access all these links later. The presentation will exist for however long Google exists, which is probably forever. And if you can't find any links, just email me. My email is right here. Maybe you want to give kids a little more help. So you add one of these content and vocabulary checklists to identify vocabulary you'd like to see in your response. Maybe even a little more. They've got the checklist now, and they've got some hints about the kind of information that would answer these questions. Or last, maybe students need a little extra help with this combination prompt, which is the hardest part about this, combining the sentences. So you maybe would break it up into two sections. In the first part, I want you to talk about the time and place. In the second part, I want you to connect the time and place and previous events to whatever event you're giving historical context for. So there's just some ideas on how you might modify some of the assessments, the formative assessments, to meet your students' needs. If you're really interested in like the big idea with these, you can scroll down further and see how a student might actually track their progress on each of these I can statements over 3 different assignments. And there's some student assignments in there too, but I'm getting off track here. So if I go back to the presentation, there's one other recommendation here. I don't know if you're aware of this, but regular formative assessments and end of unit assessments can be a little boring. And we've got quite a few people think that history is boring. So you might want to spice it up with something like a GRASP task. GRASP stands for goal, role, audience, situation, and product. So basically you just have to have a part of the task that meets all of those requirements. So for example, here's something on the Neolithic Revolution, where your goal is to explain what the Neolithic Revolution was, describe life after it. And so you are a leader of a nomadic tribe attempting to convince your group to either join the Neolithic Revolution by settling down and starting to farm, or to maintain a Paleolithic lifestyle. And the students write a persuasive speech. I find that having this format, goal, role, audience, situation, product, just makes it a little easier to create these creative types of assessments. And I think as long as you're meeting the same content and skill goals, it's something that you are encouraged to do. Any questions about anything I've talked about so far, the assessments, modifying the assessments, the curriculum in general? Put them in the chat. And I would say to Robin's concerns about the length of readings, that is a concern for everybody. And I don't think that the Regents exam is going to be changing the length of their readings anytime soon. And unfortunately, I sure will. Unfortunately, the new Regents exams seem to have even longer passages than the previous Regents exams. Yeah, I'll go over role. So in GRASP, the role is just like the student's role. In this first one, they're the leader of a nomadic tribe. Or in the second one, they are a museum director. Oh, great question. At what point in the year should students be able to write without modifications or scaffolding? I would make the goal for 10th grade, let's say April. Ideally, you get students there earlier and then you can work on other skills, but I would aim for April. Like if they're taking a mock Regents exam, that would be a great time to say, all right, everybody, we're on scaffolding level 1. You don't have any of those sentence stems anymore. You can really do this. Go for it. Is the idea that we give them a hypothetical role in a historical situation. I'd be careful with that. It's the Neolithic Revolution is a pretty tame topic. And this one on the right-hand side is more applying history than taking on a role in history. I am not going to say that everyone should do role plays in class because those can get real sketchy depending on what the topic is. So I would say use your best judgment. Any other questions before we go to the website? Okay, let's do it. All right, we're going to go to the website so I can show you where some of these resources are. We'll do a little Google skill. So if you don't know what the website is yet, here it is, curriculum.newvisions.org. I'll type it in here too. And that's where I'm going. Let me just share on a different screen. Okay. Somebody give me an affirmative. Can you see the correct New Vision's curriculum website on this page? Nice, thank you. So let me go to the main website I asked you to go to. This is curriculum.newvisions.org. This is where all of our curriculum projects are housed, and there are quite a few. There are quite a few. So send them to your colleagues and see if they're interested. Just a note, though, that they're all a little different. They're all developed with the content area in mind. So if you are using social studies, you're using global, and you tell your colleague, oh, just use the end of unit closer, and they're a science teacher, they probably don't have something called end of unit closer. But they will be able to get through these materials and decide if they want to use parts or all of it. But we're going to go to social studies, being that it is the best topic. So this is the website. And I want to show you a couple of places to get assessment materials. The first are the unit pages. So this is how most people use the website. They come here, they see all this, and they say, oh, I'm teaching Global 2 or I'm teaching Global 1, and they find the unit they're teaching. Let's say I'm teaching the Cold War, and that unit is called Unresolved Conflict, 1945 and 1991. I'm going to click on that. So here on this page, you can expand each of these boxes to see some of the information that we have, some of the resources that we have for you. There's some unit planning materials there. And then the very first box on all these pages is end of unit assessments. We have organized these unit pages to encourage backwards design. So we are going to start with end of unit assessments before we get into the rest of the materials, which is especially convenient because that's what this webinar is about. So to access the end of unit assessment, I'm going to give this a click. And you'll see right here in this white box, there is some text. Most people don't read it. They just go to open resource. But if you do read it, you'll note the same thing I mentioned earlier, that if you do not have access to the assessments, you have to fill out the form that's linked here. So if you haven't done it yet, give that a click. So let me open this resource. Oh shoot, I don't have access because I'm not signed in. So if this happens to you and you know you filled out your assessment access form and I've given you access, then you just have to sign into any Google account. I'm going to sign into my personal one. Somebody in the last webinar made a funny joke about how their password is the same as mine. It's all stars. Hilarious. Oh God, really? Okay. Yeah. There's my phone number, everybody. This will be on the internet forever. All right, so now that I've signed in, I can look at the end of unit assessment. The first few pages are for teachers. This has got your standards information. There's a link to the teacher materials, which I'll click on in a minute. And then as you scroll down, you can see that this is actually designed to look almost just like a Regents exam. Got the same instructions. And as I scroll down, even though this unit is on the Cold War, the first topics assessed are the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution, because these are cumulative exams. So you're going to have questions from previous units. We try to make it so that a third of the exam is on the current unit. And you can see that starting here with question 17. All of these are stimulus-based multiple choice questions. There's a part 2 section, just like the Regents exam. You get 2 documents, and students have to answer these questions. And then at the end, there's an enduring issues essay also. So I want to show you one other thing. Oh, before I go back to the teacher materials, you'll notice that here I am on this page, and I don't really want to give my students these first pages because these are for teachers. So, and I can't, if I highlight it and I hit delete, I can't get rid of it. I can't seem to modify what's here. It's like a PDF document for me. But it doesn't have to be. You can do something special. It's called making a copy. And it's the most important skill you need to know if you're using Google. So to make a copy, there are 3 steps. 1, make sure that you're signed into a Google account. I am. I can tell because up here in the top right-hand corner, I've got my Google account signed in. If I wasn't, it would say sign in, and I would know I have to do that. So that's step 1, sign into your Google account. Step 2, file. Click on file. Hey, don't click on the file that's at the top of your browser. That's not the one you want. You want the one closest to the document. File. Step 1, sign in. Step 2, file. Step 3, make a copy. This is going to give you a version that you yourself own and nobody else can have. You have the opportunity to rename it if you'd like. You can also organize it in your Google folders. So I'm going to just put it in my drive. I hit make a copy. And now I've got a version that's all my own, and I can change it however I'd like. I can now get rid of this pesky table. I can go down here and I can change some of the questions if I'd like. I don't like that one option, or maybe I have a different enduring issues document I'd like to put in. I can change things. Cool. So that's important. Know how to make a copy. All right, I'm going to go back to the website real quick, show you one other thing. So there is the assessment, and then there's also the teacher materials posted right below it. You'll also notice for global right now, there are a bunch of different types of assessments. There's one aligned to the new Global Regents exam, and there are some aligned to the transition exam. Those people in New York State will know what I'm talking about. Students could take both, it's a possibility, or the old one or the new exam. So that stuff is still up there. It'll remain up there until after June. Oh my God, Nadine has got it. Let me go back to your comment about why it's such a pain in the butt to deal with formatting in just a second, because I got onto this teacher material avenue. So here are the teacher materials for that same exam. It's got the answers to the questions, very helpful. Also, as you scroll down, there's some statistics about each question. And if I scroll down to part 2 and part 3, here's part 2, you'll see some possible responses to each of the questions as well. Here are some example responses for a score of 1, some possible incorrect responses. All right, let me go back to my copy of that first assessment and talk about what Nadine and Robin are bringing up in the chat, and that is the difficulty of formatting. New Visions uses a lot of tables and columns, which makes it difficult to format, to change formatting. So you gotta be a little careful with it. So for example, if I scroll down here and I look at this first page, there's first 2 columns here. And if you wanna reveal it, this is a little trick of the trade. I'm gonna highlight this table and I'm gonna change the border color so you can actually see where the cells are. And then if I were to delete like this table, there's a table inside a table, it can get a little complicated. So if you run into some real problems with this, you can shoot me an email and I'll try to help you out with it. The other problem that comes up is that instead of making a copy, some people go to File and they download as Microsoft Word document. You can totally do that. If you're more comfortable in Microsoft Word than you are in Google, or let's say you use Schoology in your district and it's easier to share things out through Microsoft Word, but know that the formatting is going to change even more. It's going to be even more of a problem if you use Microsoft Word. So leave yourself some time before class to deal with formatting issues. And if you lose a page, if you lose a, excuse me, if you lose an image or something. We create the materials using Google instead of Microsoft. Everything's on Google just because it's how easy it is to make a copy. And we also use Google because it's easy for us to make changes. If we were to use Microsoft, we would have to make a change on the file and then upload the file. And then every time we make another change, you have to upload another file. So Google is a lot easier for us. Also, New Visions is a big Google organization. So it's a little easier for us to do that. All right, I want to show you a couple other places where you can get the assessment materials. So first place to get assessments, in each of the units. Go to the units, it's that first pull down menu. The same thing for US history. Let me go to US History's Unit 6. For US History, they have, or we have first a set of what is basically on the exam bank right here for you if you want it for that unit. And then there's also the end of unit assessments here for US History. So if you're teaching towards the new US History exam, you would want these framework aligned ones. And they have the same resources as global, cumulative exams, part 1, 2, and 3, and sample responses for parts 2 and 3 in the teacher materials. Okay, last part of the site I want to show you is where you can get all of this information at once. So I'm going to go to Regents Readiness. This is the second place where you can get assessments for the materials. I'm going to go to this second option here, Regents Prep and Writing Resources for Global 2 exam. Under this Regents Readiness section of the page, you can find a bunch of the things I've talked about already today. The first thing you can find is the exam question bank right here. So this is a link to the exam question bank where you can find all the items for global and US history. And we have a question about it. Are all the questions on the end of unit assessments also in the exam question bank? Yes, they are. And they are also modified to align to the new Regents exam. So in our exam question bank, it's all stuff for the new Regents exam, and we use those for the end of unit assessments. So if you are doing global, or any, I guess, you can go here for Regents Readiness to get the exam question bank. And also, if you scroll past all this really great stuff you should check out later, you can find all the end of unit assessments for global in one spot. So if you don't want to click all the way through all the units and you just want access to all the assessments, here they are for all of global. One more stop on the website. I'm going back to Regents Readiness, show you where you can get the US history stuff. So if you scroll down to the last option, Regents Prep Framework US History, this is where you'll find the new assessments and Regents Prep materials for the new exam. You can click here to get any information about the new US exam. Like I said, there's not a lot out there, but if you'd like to, Aruna, who is also on the chat, has put together all the information that the state has put out into one spot for you to find conveniently. Here also a link to the exam question bank. And then right below that, end of unit assessments aligned to the social studies framework. So you can see we've got end of unit assessments for units 1 through 7. So there you go. Oh, thanks for saying hi, Aruna. All right, everybody. I am reaching the end of my time tonight. We are finishing up. So I'm just going to put up my contact information. Anyone that's got questions, put them into the chat. I will just wait here for the next 120 seconds, and then I'll answer any questions that come up. Really happy you could all join me tonight. Oh, and if you haven't yet, put in your name and your school that's I'm taking attendance. Oh, nice, concept maps. Everyone's got to find those concept maps. They're awesome. All right, everybody, thank you again for your time. And sign up for another webinar. We're doing it every month. Good night.